Hi, today we're going to paint this seahorse using two different watercolor techniques, the wet on wet technique, and we're also going to use a very unique product that I think you're going to have a lot of fun with. You're not going to want to miss it. So get your art supplies out and let's get started. Okay, I've sketched out the seahorse here. Just a basic sketch, and I've got my little dish here that I'm going to mix my colors in, and I've got out my 1-inch flat brush. First, I'm going to make some puddles of the colors I want to use in the background here for the water. So I have a purple. You can use any color you like. On this one, I've got my purple, got my little test strip there so I can see how much water I need to put in it. So I want it to be transparent and watery looking. So I'm going to add, probably about skim milk consistency. Maybe a little thicker, Let's go a little thicker. Let's go to 2%. And just add your water there until it's, not super watery. Still have a little color because we're going to do wet on wet. So I'm going to add water to the paper. So I have to include that in my equation as far as how much water to mix with my paint, because that water that's on the paper will also mix with the paint. So I got a cobalt blue, a cerulean, I never say that right. It looks a little bit light in the video, but that's cobalt there. You got to have a little bit of a depth of color in there too. So the purple works well for that. And you want to get different, values of color in there. And maybe I'll put a little gold. I'm not sure. This is quinacridone gold, so, but I'll have it ready. Now I've rinsed out my brush really well, and I'm just going to use clean water, and I'm going to just kind of dab it randomly around my seahorse. And all those little things on the back of him, those little balls that stick out, I'm not getting too close, but kind of as close as I can, because I'm going to nudge the paint into those spaces once I get it all on there and that the water is really moving. So here's the important part. You have to have enough water on your paper so that the paint will flow. So you can see it's quite shiny, and it will soak into the paper, especially this initial wetting of the paper. So take that into account. If you don't have enough water on the paper, it won't move, and you'll just get stripes and dry brush. So you got to have enough water. So I am taking my watery paint now, and I'm just kind of putting it here and there. I'm not going to cover the whole page. I want my borders to be a little bit loose, and I'm just kind of tucking in around the detailed areas a little bit at this point. I'm not worried about them. I'm just trying to get even coverage all over my paper. And you can see I kind of left it a little bit lighter at the top, but I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. That way, if I don't get back to those areas, they're already kind of blended together and they haven't dried. If they dry, then we got a little bit of a problem, because when you go back over it again with some more paint, it's going to leave a mark wherever that dry area meets the new wet area. So gotta try to plan that out, because it is the whole page you gotta cover, and well, not all, not to the edges and everything, but there's a lot of area is what I'm saying that you need to cover. So you want to plan it out and do it in workable chunks. So that's my solution for that, because there's a border of water all the way around the entire seahorse, because he's just swimming on through. But I just leave a few little lighter areas so I have a little wiggle room there. So now I'm going to add my depth in. So I'm going to add some of this purple. You can see how well it's moving. There's a lot of water. A lot of water on that page. And I'm just kind of dragging it in. I'm thinking a vertical kind of motion to this water. Almost like he's swimming through grasses, even though there's no grasses in here yet. And I'll do the same thing with my cobalt blue here. And I'm just dabbing it in, trying to be careful not to go on the seahorse itself. But I'm going to do the seahorse darker than this background is, so it'll blend. You could still see where it is if you didn't get it really well the first time, but if it gets onto my seahorse a little bit, it's okay. I can make it work. So I'm just going in with just the tippy corner of my flat brush and getting into some of those details, and also remembering that I have it lighter kind of through the middle. There, now I'm just going to lift that paper up and let that paint all kind of blend together and drip. And I kind of like that watery look. I'm going to get my round brush before it dries. And I'm just going to come in and start blending some of those colors very quickly into those, around those little bumps all around the outside. I'm going to define that area, so I'm going to make it light as I can, but still blend in with my background. And that'll also help my seahorse, since he's going to be a little darker. He'll stand out. So I'm trying to work all these in really fast before it dries too much. And just keep on dabbing, moving that water around. Now these areas that I'm pushing the paint into are a little bit, well, they are dry. So just that water that's on the paper and the paint is all I have to work with. If I add water to it and paint to it at this point, I'll probably get a bloom, which I'm going to add some on purpose, but I don't want them to look all the way around the back of the seahorse. I don't want that halo effect. So I'm just doing the best I can to kind of dab them in at this point. And I'm going to purposely put some blooms in there. Blooms are when you put wet water on a little bit drier of paint that's still wet, and it'll push that paint outward and leave a white spot underneath with an edge that kind of looks like a cloud blooming into the sky. So I'm just dabbing with my fingers, just some clean water, just sprinkling just a little bit on there and watching it. You see what it does? Kind of moves that paint around. You can use this for a fun effect, but you know, usually when you're trying to do something smooth like a face or portrait, you probably don't want to let any blooms enter into the painting because it'll look funny, you know. So I forgot to add some around that back fin. Let me see if I can nudge it around here. Kind of soften that hard edge that I have there with the brush stroke from before, and I'm just kind of blending it into that back fin there. And I'm just putting some water now just to blend it. Okay. So I'm painting it all with this yellow green. So I did wet that back fin before I started this yellow green. And you want your background to be dry before you start this, or all that yellow green will just blend right into the background. And I'm just kind of dabbing it, and I can see I've kind of got some brush strokes I didn't want in that background, but I think it's all going to be fine. So now I'm just adding a little bit of the gold just to give it a little bit of a hue, kind of glowing. I like this Quin Gold for that effect. I think it really makes it have depth. Brings out a light, like a warmth from inside. And I'm just gonna throw in a little bit of some green here on the edges just to define that back fin a bit. Just dabbing. And I'm going to end up putting the brush show on here, which is a kind of like a crystallized powder pigment. So it'll all kind of blend in with that too. And I'm just kind of bringing it around, just bringing out that little bit of a glowy effect. I get some more of my yellow green, and I want to define his face. So I'm going under the chin area and the cheek, putting in some gold, just dropping in colors that I think will look nice. And these are all very light, so once they dry, I can also add another color on top of it and change it. And I think this little bottom part might stay green. So there's a few little stripes in this curly Q tail here. So I'm just kind of painting a background in. I'm going to do something over the top, but I just kind of want to start adding some color in here because I want to do the brush show, and the brush show is unpredictable. So anywhere that I think I definitely am going to need some definition in the seahorse, I'm going to paint a little underneath first. So I'm adding some more of that Viridian and defining that line right there because he's kind of soft right there at this point. And I'm just kind of blending it in, getting that line nice and smooth. So I'm using the tip of my brush to smooth it out and also to make the lines nice and crispy. So you're actually almost pushing that paint onto the little bit drier area, and that'll define it there. See that? I'm just taking the tip of my brush, going around, and it's still wet, so it's still going to soften and blend into the paint that I have underneath. I just kind of want to define that outer edge. That's the Viridian. And maybe let it come up a little bit there. Don't have a stop line. I'm blending it in. And I kind of just have to let it dry and see what else I want to do on that. So just rinse my brush out really good and kind of take a look at it and figure out how I want to go about it. So this is the brush show. Now the brush show comes in these little plastic jars. Here's some of the colors that just mixed with water. So this is just brush show and water. I'm kind of liking the gold, or the lime green one looks pretty because it's got the blues in it and everything. I think I'm going to go with that one. So on the very top of the lid, I have poked a little hole. Actually, my friend did. So we could shake it on, but I want a little bit more control. So I'm going to do my seahorse in sections, and I'm going to just use the water here and get it all nice and wet. Being very careful now, I have to define my edge with the water, and it's hard to see sometimes, but wherever the water is, the paint will follow. So I want to be very precise. And in these little areas in his tail, I'm going to kind of just get it wet and try to keep an eye on that and keep it wet until I can get in there with my paintbrush. So I'm going to put some water on. I'm not doing too much. Now I'm going to take my brush show. I'm just going to get a little tiny brush here and tap it into the brush show and tap it onto my painting. And I'm trying really hard to just get it where I have that water. And the brush show has different flecks of color in there. So there's blues and greens and yellow in the one color mix. So that's what's fun about it. It's very unpredictable. You're not sure what you're going to get. I'm just taking my brush with some water on it and just kind of softening out those little crystals and getting some more water on them if there's like a little pile of powder there, and just seeing what happens. So I'm just blending it in, and you can see it blends just like any watercolor. You can get it wet and move it around. It gets everywhere though, so you really gotta be very precise, very careful, so that it doesn't go all over the background, and then when you get any water or anything on it, it'll color it this color. So I'm adding a second layer. I'm just going little by little. I'm adding a second layer of it now just to add a little bit of that modeling look into his tummy there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm coming back with just some water and kind of nudging them around. And I'm liking that, real speckly mottled look there. And I'm going to come back and define my edge. And also in the end, we're going to use some titanium white and we're going to, decorate the seahorse with that. So I'm not too worried about all those little lines and everything. As long as I can see them that I have drawn underneath there, that'll be good. Isn't that fun? You can just kind of play and mush it around and it makes its own color combination. Fun stuff. I've used it in plants, like doing, the leaves, just sprinkle a little bit of that in there. And I'm just going to try to blend it into that tail. I'm not sure what I want to do with the tail yet. So I'm just going to kind of blend it down. That's why we wet it completely around in the beginning. So now I'm going to add a little bit of this Quin gold in there, trying to blend it with the colors that are in the brush show. I'm thinking if I put the brush show all the way down there, it might get all over the place, but it might be all right. I can always add paint to that once I get kind of knowing what I'm going to do here. So a little bit more right in here. Rinse out my brush before I start blotting it, otherwise you'll get a whole big blob right where you start. So just a little bit more. I like that right there. Get that mottled effect. And I'll bring a little bit more right in around the belly and blending it down into the tail. Blending it all the way around. Yeah, look at that. How fun is that? Yeah, it's exciting stuff. I love it when watercolor can paint itself. Looks like I went through a lot of trouble there. Now it has to dry. Waving it in the air isn't going to do a whole lot. Usually at this point I take a break, come on back in a little while, and once it's all dry, or take the blow dryer to it. Somehow I lost the autofocus on my video, and I thought it was in better focus than it is. But I already shot the whole thing before I noticed this, and I thought it was better to have something rather than nothing to show you. So at this point, it might make your eyes go a little buggy, but just want to continue on with him. And I'm going to put a layer of the watercolor underneath now. Instead of just plain water, I'm going to do a very watered down blue in there. And I'm also going to use that brush out, and I'm just kind of seeing what it's going to look like before I put it on my fish, on my seahorse. Okay, so I'm just going to take a section here, and I'm adding the water, and I'm going to add that paint in there also. I'm just taking water and deciding where I want it to be around his face, and then down his back, and it kind of stops. It curls around the tail. So I gotta keep my lines separated. I'm just gonna put a light wash of the cerulean blue and just let it mix with that water. You can see how much water I have on there, so don't make it too dry or it won't move, and your brush shell won't disintegrate into the water, and it'll just be a blob of powder, which isn't all that beautiful. So I'm just going in with this blue now, and anywhere that I want this next color of this brush shell to be, I'm just putting this water in some cerulean blue. Right down his back, and it kind of stops there at his tail. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the paintbrush with a little bit of that lime green brush on there. And I'm just shaking on a little from my brush. Just tapping the end of my brush. I'm just letting it come in there. And I see that some of the spots that I went a little heavier, I'm getting it to be darker than I did the first time I applied it to his belly area. Because I want it to blend with the belly. I want it to be just a little bit different. That's why I put the blue in as the base. But I'm not making him stripes, but you could do that. And just kind of tapping. Now if you blend it too much, like I kind of did right there on the neck, it gets more solid. So just tapping it in there with the water. Mostly the water that's already on the paper, and just moving it around and paying attention to some nice crisp edges. Again, I apologize for the blurry video. But you can't go back and do it again with watercolor because there's just no undoing it. Once you got it down there, you have to work with it. So now that has to dry before I put another layer on it. I'm going to do it with my blow dryer because I got all that pigment where I want it. I'm just on low, hot, but on a low airflow because I don't really want to blow that wet paint onto parts of the painting that I don't want it on. So I'm just kind of going slow and just drying that area. Best if you can leave it dry naturally. If you got time to go take a break and stop the video, let it dry naturally. And I would just take the back of my inside of my wrist and touch my hand to the paper, and if it's cold, I can feel that water. I gotta keep drying it. If it just feels like the rest of the paper, it's good. It's dry. So now I'm just flipping it over because I want to paint something in this tail area. And all the way up the back. And I'm kind of going to ignore those little spots, little bumps all the way down his back when I'm doing this. I'm going to kind of blend into them, but I'm going to come back and do something with those on their own. So now I'm just taking, rinse my brush out clean, just using water, and I'm just going to put water wherever I want this next layer of the brusho to go. I'll put a little bit of the cobalt blue, will very watered down in here, and see if I can't get it to be a little bit different shade. Bring a little bit of those blues out. And I decided on this big one because I really want that one to blend in well. I want to take some of the purple and just kind of put it in there and then let it bleed into that blue. And try not to let it go all the way down, but being on the very top of his head, that one has to be the best one. So I went ahead and did that, and I'm going to do the same thing all the way down his spine. And I'm just defining that a little bit. I kind of want it to glow a little bit, so I'm going to come back and take some of that purple out. Just with a clean brush, get as much water out of it as you can and just come back and use it like a mop and just start mopping it up. And I'll blend it down and blend it back up and kind of watch it as it's drying in case I need to move it around a little bit with my brush. And here comes the brusho. Just sprinkling in a little. I'm trying not to get it on the purple. And just kind of moving it around. And I'm seeing that I really didn't put a lot of blue in the background, so it's not showing up too much because the Brusho is darker. So it's not giving me a shaded effect. So you could use more blue if you want that shaded effect. In the end, he turns out pretty, so I didn't worry about it too much. Just putting in a little bit more blue in here. Got to be careful too, not to put in too much water, and I can see I need to spread this out. See how it wants to jump over into the part that I already painted that is dry, but because I used too much water, it wants to bleed over. But it'll be fine in the end, but I'm just going to spread it out within its little sections there, within a line, because what's nice about this part is you have all these lines. So if you need to stop at a line, because then if that dries and you go back to it, and where the wet paint meets up with the dry paint, it'll leave a dark line, but that's okay because there's already going to be a line there. So just work in sections. And I'm doing the same thing now. And I was trying to get it a little bit more on the blue side, but because I had put so much water on there, I had to spread it out farther than I intended. But I think I got a little bit of the blue while it's still blending in with the first one. I'm just coming back and mopping out a little bit of that purple. I want them to be a little transparent looking. Okay, so now I'm bringing my water and some of that blue and going on and doing the next section to the line. I'll stop at a line. Don't go too far, because if you go too far, you'll lose control. See that? I just did 2 sections. There's my brush, so just a teeny bit on my brush. And just very carefully, these spots are getting smaller. Very carefully, I'm just trying to tap it on, and now I'm coming back with my brush with a little bit of water in it and just tapping around it all, blending it in, moving it around, defining those edges nice and crisp. And come back with this in the purple. Try to keep those nice and crisp also. If you get too much water on it, it's kind of hard to paint with it. The water wants to keep moving and it keeps blending. So I'm going to mop some of that water out. Again, just rinsing my brush off, drying it off on my little paper towel, and then coming in and trying to soak it up. And I can at this point define those little round balls a little bit. Can always come back and go darker, so it's better to be light. And now I'm just taking that watered down blue and continuing on, but I didn't put the water on first. I wanted to see if I couldn't get it to be a little bit more contrast. So I can see it on there, but I kind of wanted it to be more blue. But I'm using that Brusho. That's pretty strong stuff. It's got a lot of pigment in it. And I just put my purple on my little ends here. Now don't go too far ahead. If you don't think you can handle it, don't do 4 of them at one time. Just do 1 at a time. You can always stop the video at any point and then restart it when you're ready to go again. So I hope you're painting along with me. If you are, I'd love to see what you're painting. I'd love to hear any comments. Let me know if it was easy to follow along. If you have any suggestions, I'm always open to them. I don't know if that I can always do them because I'm not super computer literate. So I'm working on getting these videos a little bit more streamlined, but you know, mistakes happen and they'll get better as they go along, I hope. But let me know if you have any ideas for me. I'm always open to constructive criticism. And we're just filling in with that Brusho, blending it in, blending it into the little dots on the top, or on the back, I should say. So you can see in some areas the brush is bluer because some of those bluer pigments were on the tip of the brush, and sometimes it's greener. So, but the colors all look really well together. So that's what's important there. And I'm coming down again. Stopping at a line. A little bit of brush show. And just kind of nudging it around. And I went ahead and put the purple in, and now I'm doing the same thing behind the back fin here. A little bit closer up so you can see those crystals melting and moving around there. All that powder just dissolves right into the water. Even it out a little. Trying to do this in a smooth motion. I kind of want a big section there, but I can do it. If you can't do it, just do small. Gotta work fast. Fast, but you gotta be neat too, so you don't want it to be too messy. A little brush-o. I can see some of it's flying onto the other part of my seahorse. So I'll have to blow that off there. If I add another color on top of that, it'll just melt into that color too. So it's pretty strong, so I don't want that to happen. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Nudge it with the tip of my brush. Moving it around. You can fast forward if this is getting long for you, but some people want to paint right alongside me, so that's why I'm doing like the full video. Although I'll confess I do have it sped up a bit, you know, otherwise it's going to be a 9-hour video because that's how long it takes me to do a painting. So it's going to take you longer than an hour and a half or whatever the video length is. So stop it where need be. And just keep moving it around until it looks conducive with the rest of the painting there. Want to have a smooth transition. And I got a little bit too much there, but I'm just going to mop it out a little and add a little bit to this one because it got really wonky. So now I got a really big one there, but it's okay. I'll make the one next to it a little bigger too and kind of blend them on in. A little, have to be a fast thinker on your feet, I guess. You have to be able to adjust and pivot as you go. And it's good just to do, you know, a bunch of little paintings just to learn the techniques. I mean, nothing has to turn out to be something worthy of the wall, but you know, just learn these techniques and practice. The more you paint, the better you get faster. So if you can paint even 15 minutes a day, somehow that little bit of time sticks in your memory bank. And then the next time you go, those memories will start popping through and those techniques, and you'll remember what to do next. Took me a long time to be able to just sit down and paint without an instructor. It took me, you know, probably a year, but I did not paint every day. I was just painting like once a week. And it took me about a year before I thought, well, I think I know how to attempt this on my own now. So, and then I didn't know about YouTube. I'm not sure if it was a thing then. So to look for, other instructors' videos and that, I didn't know to do that. So I just waited to the next week to ask my instructor more questions, or she would show us how to do things. You gotta go all the way around the tail. It gets a little harder as you get into that windy tail because the sections are smaller, so you don't have as much room to use your brush strokes. They have to be smaller brush strokes. You can tell it's a lot right there, but it's hard to control it. I'll just move it around. But the more you move it, you kind of lose that mottled effect because you're making it more solid because you're mixing it in and blending it. So you really want to try to do as little of that as possible. So I'm just kind of tapping on it and drawing with it where I have to, like bringing the brush out on those edges and making the details smooth. Trying not to overwork it or it'll just be all one color. You won't get those pops of blue and green in there. I'm coming back with my purple. And at this point, all the dots are close to the tail, so we don't have that little stem or whatever. I don't know what to call it. So they're actually touching the wet brush show, but I wanted to kind of have that blended effect. So it's okay if it bleeds into that brush a little bit. You can nudge it around to make it not so noticeable where it's just kind of sitting there. And we'll do the same thing around here, getting tight, getting tighter. Just dry your brush on your little stack of paper towels where you need to, so you always have control of that water. That's the thing of watercolor, controlling the water. I like to think of it as painting with tinted puddles of water rather than paint. So I like to think that I'm just coloring my water and moving it around the paper. If you think of it that way, you kind of can understand the control, because you need to keep that wet paint in the wet areas and not let them go all into the dry areas where possible. I like the turquoisey color we got there. That's pretty. I wonder if I can continue that into the rest of the tail and make that blend. I really like that. So I'm bringing in my purple here, cobalt purple. Cobalt violet, that's what that's called. And it blended a lot into that green brush over there. I'm just going to see what I can move it around a little bit, mop it out. Do the same thing to the rest of them. And I'm deciding if I want to mess with that area where it blended in, or does it look good. So at this point it's all still wet. I can still move it, and I'm just going around the tail trying to make these decisions as I go. And that one kind of blended into the brush show too, but that's not too bad. Kind of dab at it a little. And I'll just leave it alone and come back and finish this little bit of tail left. And I can see now that I have underpainted that one section of the tail there at the beginning, and I can see that we're going to need to add quite a bit more color to it now that the seahorse is, colored in. So I can see that it looks odd, so I'm going to have to add some color to that inside of that curly tail. And here's some purple. Just outlining it first with the tip of my brush and then filling in the center. Really got a lot up there. I'm trying to mop it out. There. It's pretty easy to correct it when it's still wet. Once it dries, there's tricks. There's tricks you can do, but you can use a Mr. Clean magic eraser, and that'll, scrub some of it off, but it also scrubs your paper. So when you are painting again on top of that same spot, you're going to have like a texture issue with your paper. So I don't like to paint over it if I use that. Mostly what I would do is, let it dry. If I can't fix it before it dries, I'll let it completely dry, and then I'll come back with just clean water and a paper towel, or I really like to use the one-ply toilet tissue because it has no pattern. Viva paper towels have no pattern. The cloth-like ones. So something without a pattern. If you have a pattern, it'll leave a mark. So anyway, you just wet it down and then just push down with your paper toweling or whatever you're going to use, and bring it straight up. Don't rub, just bring it straight up, and you can see a little of the paint will have came off in the paper towel. And now do it again. So you can do that 3 or 4 times before it starts to compromise the paper underneath. So see how good you can fix it, and if you can't fix it, then you can always paint darker over it. So there's ways. You can scrub it out with a scrubby brush. So now I gotta figure out what do I want to do on his face here. I think I'm gonna have a contrast. So I'm gonna go purple. Gotta make that purple come into play a little bit more. I'm just kind of wetting it first with a little bit of that purple in my brush. It makes it easier for you to see, I think, where I'm putting it. And since it's going to be purple, a little bit of color in there won't hurt. If I was going to use different colors, then that purple would influence the color I use. So just coming around the top of his nose and in front of his forehead. Okay. And I'm not going to leave any brush show in this area. I'm going to leave it smooth so he's can get more defined. So I'm just going to come in and putting some purple. I think this one needs to be a little larger because that one behind it is pretty big. And I got this little sunburst around his eye, so I'm going around all of that. I kind of like that little dark area there right in front of his mouth. Defining these little stars, going around them nice. Adding a little bit more color there, mopping out a little bit. Anything I need to correct at this point while it's wet, I want to do it. Okay, so now I have this fin, and I've got some lines in there. I thought maybe I'll do those purple to bring the purple around into them. And I'm just taking water on either side of that wet stripe and just softening that edge just a little bit. I don't want it to be too hard line. So I'm just letting it kind of soften. I'm bringing a little bit of purple around the outside of it, just from the wet paint that I already painted. And in this area here, kind of clean that up. And now to deal with this part underneath, I'm just going to take some water. I am brushing my water all over that paint that's already dry. So I'm doing another layer. I'm going to take the brush out. I'm going to try really hard to just think it needs to blend in with the rest. Oops, I got a lot right in that one spot. We'll try to move it around a little. Okay. And now I'm just taking my wet brush and try to activate that pigment. Move it around. Trying to get my lines nice and smooth. Being mindful of how much water I'm putting in there. I don't want it to move beyond the borders. Just smoothing it out. A little bit much there. And then I'm going to come back. Now this is dry. Again, it's out of focus. I apologize. I'm just going to come in real quick with some of that cerulean blue and paint around his eye. And seahorses, they have, a lot of times their eyes are striped or dotted, or they're really wild looking. So I'm going to put a little decoration around his eye here. Of course, we're not doing a realistic painting. We're just making a cute little fun seahorse. You could take a picture of your painting and have it printed into cards. Wouldn't that be cute? Cute little birthday card, or thinking of you, make somebody smile. So I'm just coming on in the middle here and leaving just a little bit of highlight white as I painted around that little circle in the center. And then I went ahead and painted the outside. So I used the Payne's Gray. This is Doc Martens, or Doc P.H. Martin Bleed Proof White. It is titanium white pigment. And you just add water to it and you can paint with it. So I'm coming around and I'm doing all the little lines and outlines and things in him with a very fine 00 brush. I'm just going to take. So now this titanium white here, this bleed proof white, it's kind of chalky. It's opaque, which is why I like to use it for something like this. But if you mix it in with your watercolor, it'll turn out really chalky looking. So I use it mainly for doing, highlights, anything I want to define, or, highlights with white. I use it for that. I also drop it into wet paint and let it mix in, bleed out, so it leaves like it's chalky, but it's like a white blotch. Like it adds interest and texture to your painting. So it's pretty cool when you drop it like in a floral painting and you just kind of drop it in here and there for the highlights on your petals and that. So it kind of makes it look like the sun is shining on it, gives some light back to your painting if you've overworked it. You can splash in a little bit of that, but you have to do it while it's wet, or wet it and then put it on. So I'm just going to go through and all those little lines that I have in there, defining his little sections. I'm going through with the white, and I'm just thinking of this kind of like frosting a cake, like decorating a cake. So, kind of just more illustrative rather than realistic. I'm not looking for realistic. Just having fun and making a whimsical piece. Just drawing my lines. So I'm just dipping my wet brush right into the bottle, and I have a little bit of water in there, and then I use the side of the bottle to kind of mix my color, mix my water in the white to get the consistency I want. You can put it on your palette also, but wipe it up before it dries, because once it dries on your palette, it's hard to get it off. So it's not quite like regular watercolor where you just put water in it and you can clean it up. So that's why I use the bottle to mix it in. I'm just using the side of the bottle, like up around the rim. I just kind of wheel my brush around in there. Or you could use like a palette paper that you would use for acrylic paint. It's kind of almost like got a waxy, plasticky coating on it. As long as it's, waterproof. Styrofoam plate, that works too. So you can mix it in with your water on there. But I've used it enough times now I can mix it right in the bottle. So I'm just drawing all these little sections. If you're not really good at drawing yourself, a good source is Pixabay is a place that you can find pictures. And if, a lot of them gotta read about them, but a lot of them are copyright free. They don't mind that you use them. So, you could take a picture and then, run it through your editing program. And you can make it a black and white, and you can kind of get a pattern that way. And then you can draw on top of that, once you print it, and then draw on top of that, and then use like a carbon paper, graphite paper to transfer it to your watercolor paper. So you're just tracing it. So you can do that. So now I'm drawing those little zigzaggies that coming from his eye there. Kind of make them fun. We're just decorating. And I'm going to let that dry. And after that dries, I think I'll clean up a little bit with the black around there. So now I'm just thinking, okay, I got this white, and I can just start putting some little accents on him. So what do I want to do? So this back fin looks like a great opportunity for some little dots. So at the end of each purple little stripe, I'm trying to make a round dot. And they're not completely perfect, but make it a little bigger. Maybe that'll help. There we go. And there we go. We got some dots. Make them all the same size. Okay. And now I see, there's all these sections I can do. What do I want? Do I want circles or dots? Or I'm just going to dip the end of my paintbrush in my titanium Doc P.H. Martin bleed proof white. Just dip it in there, and using the end of my paintbrush, the handle end, just to make some little dots. You could use stencils and, play around with some stencils on top of it. You can do a little Zentangle where you're doing all the little patterns. Use a marker like a Micron ink marker that's archival. Posca acrylic pens, they're archival. You could do all the white with the pen if you wanted, or you could use black or blue or green. Be creative. Make them your own, whatever you want to do. And now I'm just painting some little bullseye circles here and there, almost kind of like he has little bumps or raised areas in his skin. I think circles are fun. They just say whimsy to me. Circles and curls. Okay, and I'm just adding a couple more around his tail. Sorry, it was off the screen there. And just kind of putting them all around. And it's too tight down there, so I think I'll skip that part and let's see where else can we add some little dots. Let's put some dots in the center of the purple dots and kind of make them stand out a little bit. Go all the way around. Just dipping the handle of my brush into my bleed-proof white. It'd be really pretty too to use like a metallic watercolor here instead of the white. That would be beautiful. Get a little shimmer. And not to forget around his head and the back of his neck, do the same thing. Just dropping it in. So I got a little bit of water in my jar of paint there to keep it liquidy. That one's a little bit bigger. Okay. Now I got that. I'm going to put some little dots around the outside of the star on his eye. Make that even more whimsical. And this is kind of bugging me right here, so let's see what we can do. Add a few dots at that end. That looks better. I still don't like those purple stripes just standing out like that. Let me think about those. And meanwhile, I got the end of the brush still paint, so let's put some more dots. So now I'm thinking at the end of all of these lines that I put on there, let's put a dot on the end of those. Kind of gives you that barnacle feel, although they wouldn't have barnacle. The whole sea life thing. Yeah, I'll put on there. And also in the center where they cross. Put a few dots all in those areas. And I'm liking them more and more the more I put on them. Your painting almost comes to an ugly point before it comes to a beautiful point. So you gotta, you just keep going sometimes and it'll make everything look really nice. Oh, I'm out of the screen, but you know what I'm doing, right? I'm just putting some of those dots there in the center area, continuing them up. There we go. Trying to see where else I need a couple that I've missed. Just a fun little painting, not too serious at all. You can relax with this one. There, now that all that has dried, isn't it pretty? You can see the definition. Put little dots on his tummy. He should have some dots on his tummy. And that edge there, I don't want to put dots on the whole thing, so I'm just kind of making it not too super straight. Get them a little bit more random looking. And different sizes, there's bigger ones and smaller ones. I think he's looking pretty festive. I'm gonna put a little bit under his chin up there. And that's probably enough. How about right down those purple dots? That's what I'll do with them. Yeah, I like that better. There, that makes them softer. They're a little bit too hard looking. There we go. Bring it out so you can see what we did. A little bit under his chin, his belly. You can use a jelly roll pen. So I was kind of playing with those to see if they showed up really well. I thought the titanium showed up better. And maybe I'll just put a little dab of the purple on top of the white. So you can see it kind of makes it milky. It's not transparent like the rest of the watercolor is. So when you paint on top things with that, it kind of looks milky, but it still has the color. And we'll just make it intentional and put one up there in his little big dot there. Now I got me a rigger, long brush, and I'm just going to do some branches. I'm just going to do a wavy line, and then off of my wavy line I'm going to add some more branches in a V shape. Maybe bring something in through there and connect it on the other side. So these branches are behind the seahorse. I'm not going to put any in front. This wavy line, and then bring those branches out. Add more branches, but in a V shape. That makes it look natural. I'm kind of working off of those wavy lines. If I got a wave, that's a place that would be really good for a branch. Like right there. And then I can add one off of that wave. And my rigger, it's got it dried funny. So it's got some bristles sticking out here and there. So I gotta be careful with it. Put as many branches as you want. You don't have to put any if you want. I thought it kind of grounded the seahorse, made him look like, you know, he's not just floating all lonely in the sea, although he might be. But he probably has some good food on these little branches. There's probably some little brine shrimp or something he'd like to eat. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my brush and I'm just using like skim milk consistency of this purple paint here. And I'm just using the tip of that rigger just to kind of scrub in some leaves. I'm not being real particular about my leaves at all. I just want them there in the background. So I'm not giving too much definition to them. The seahorse is the focus. So this is just background stuff. So some of them will go in front. Some of them will go to one side. Some will go off the edge. See that? So don't make them just on one side, then the other side. Put some in the front also. There, like that. Like that. And I'm just dropping in some color. So every time I go into my palette, I'm getting a little bit stronger of a color. And I really like that effect because some of them will be lighter as you've used up the paint off the brush. And then when you go back and get more paint, it'll be darker. I keep saying purple. I'm not using purple. I'm using cobalt. Could do it in purple. Oh, there's that wild hair. And make sure that's on the top and not dragging onto my painting. Try to fix them. And I'm just using that kind of scrubby motion. And once you get enough of them on there, they really look like a plant growing in the water there. There's lots of leafy plants as well as corals and little organisms. The fish need all of that stuff to live. seaweed and puts oxygen in the water, I suppose. And you can do as many or as little branches as you like. Kind of hate to cover up that pretty bloom I got going on there, but it'll show through a bit. I think they make it look like water. So simple, and it looks amazing, doesn't it? It really does look like there's movement in those branches. That's why you want to do them kind of curved and have them going off to a side as the current of the water would be pushing those plants in the waves. Just letting you listen to the music and relax and have fun. If you don't have a rigger, you can just use a round brush. We're just using the tip of it. I like to use it because it makes me looser. I don't have as much control. So I don't have the choice of making a beautiful, perfect leaf. So that's a good thing in this case. Some little leaves maybe that would be poking out. A couple here and there. See how I just put one or two kind of poking out behind them. I'm thinking we'll put a couple more on the other side, and they'll be a little bit taller on this side. Kind of complement the shape of the seahorse. I'm going to draw my curvy branch, and now I'm going to draw my branches off of that curvy branch. And I got a little messy there, but that's okay. I'll put a leaf there. And doing those little V shapes. And make a whole another set of these leaves here. Just do it the same way as I did on the other side, making more. Some go across the center, some go off to one side and then the other side. Mixing it up, letting some of the paint be lighter, some of it darker, more saturated. I kind of got over my little dots there, but it's okay. I can go back over them. I was trying to paint around them. I love that purple fuzzy bloom going up right around there. That one turned out really pretty. So we can use these blooms, which a lot of watercolorists would think are a bad thing. We can use them to make different effects. I probably will never be in a watercolor society where they're purist about things like that, and they're more painting things that look like a photograph almost. It's amazing how well and how talented some people are. Believe it or not, I think I can do that, but it's not my thing that I would enjoy doing. I really like just kind of fun, whimsical, light and happy art. Colorful. But that's me. Everybody does their own thing, which makes the world beautiful. Don't want it to be the same. We'd be boring, wouldn't we? And I'm just painting some on the bottom. Apologize again. You'll see them. Use that bleed proof white and just fix those dots where I messed up. Make sure your paint's dry. Make sure those dots are dry, or they'll do that. That one's not dry. I'll have to come back to it after I dry it. You can see it all bled into itself. That's kind of the effect I was talking about when you do it on flowers, or you drop the white into the water. It kind of gives that effect. So, there he is. And I might have an area or two I need to fix, like that one little blob when it dries. And I wanted to define this underneath here, chin just a bit, so I'm just using just water, and then I'm gonna try to move some of that paint around and bring in a little bit of the cobalt, a little bit of a shadow, if you will. And I just kind of want to blend it into that background, but I don't want it to be too solid. So I want it to look like the rest of the background, but I just thought it needed a little definition there. I'm just kind of smudging it around. I'm just using a really little brush. There, I think that blended in pretty well. Oh, no focus there. There we go. Now you can see them. Yeah, that looks a little bit more defined. And I'm going to take my Micron archival ink pen, and I'm just going to find a little spot to sign my name. I like to sign it in a branch or the curve of a flower or something. I like to make it part of the painting. And once you sign it, you're done. So tear off the tape. And it always looks better once you have the tape off of it, or if it's framed, it looks good. So I'm just going to go take that tape off and get rid of my little foam core board that I've covered with packing tape. That's usually what I paint on. It's nice and light, and I can turn my painting around. There. He looks better. Well, what do you think? Thank you so much. I'm glad that you joined me today. Hope you liked your painting, and I hope that you got something out of it. Peace and love to you until we meet again.